Hello everyone, welcome in. In this video, we are going to be discussing the leaking of crime scene photos by Mitchell Westerman in the Delphi Murders Case. A quick word before we start in on the information about the leak and the arrest. I would first like to do a little disclaimer here about my opinions in this case, because they do form an opinion on the leak overall as well. This case, I'm not into true crime, okay? I don't follow, murders and things like that. They're not my forte. I'm in the legal world. I like to look at legal issues and figure out legal issues. When I had originally heard about this case, killings of two young girls is extremely sad and not something in my own personality that I look into. So I have not looked into this case until I heard about this leak just the other day. It was quite fortuitous that this guy got arrested right when I posted my latest video about the leaking of the medical records in the Alexee Trevizo case. The news broke literally within 20 minutes of that video. Felt like a sign almost. But it got me looking into this case mainly because there are very, very odd legal issues going on. As you will see in the photo here, this is Mr. Richard Allen before being arrested and after. Mr. Richard Allen has not been convicted of this crime, yet he is being held in prison on a 23-1 schedule, meaning 23 hours a day in solitary confinement and 1 hour free. There are letters being produced by inmates stating that Mr. Richard Allen is being abused by guards. There are guards that have admitted to wearing these odinist patches, these patches that are associated with the possible cult that is actually responsible for this killing. We don't know that to be true, but that is the defense's statements. And after looking into a lot of this, it is very odd. And you guys know here, I'm usually the one to call out a bullcrap defense. We did it with Charlie Adelson. We're doing it with the Trevizo case as they give us more and more of their defense, and we have so much evidence in our face. We don't like to be gaslit here. We're not doing that. In this case, I do honestly feel like justice is not being served for Abby and Libby, the two girls who were viciously murdered. And I do feel like something very wrong is happening to this suspect. Remember, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. That is the way our system works. On face value, some of the evidence that they seem to have on Richard Allen might look like, oh, they have evidence on him. Look a little deeper into that evidence, and I'm possibly going to make a video on it, and they do not have really a lot to make this case. They ignored a lot of other great leads. The mysterious professor that told the detectives to not investigate the heathen pagan cult that is in that area has just up and disappeared. No one knows who told it is very, very weird, you guys. And I don't want to ever fall into a conspiratorial realm, but again, I'm pretty good at parsing through facts and BS. That's literally what I do. So again, I do have strong opinions on this case as of right now. The judge has removed the attorneys that we will be talking about that this leak ended up coming from. They do not seem to have caused this leak, that they did not want this leak. This was not intentional, but again, the judge has removed them without due process. They've tried to come back pro se, and meaning that they are going to come back and represent Mr. Richard Allen for free because they have already worked on their defense for him. They believe very strongly that Mr. Richard Allen is innocent, and they are worried about his due process rights because of making a new attorney enter on the case would cause the case to take up a whole nother year. And he is, for lack of a better term, deteriorating quickly in prison. Okay. And when I say in prison, yes, in prison. He has not been convicted, yet he is in prison. There are cases where that happens. This is just very interesting. The sheriff, by his own words, said he's going to the prison for safekeeping. So very, very odd. Mr. Richard Allen was a CVS manager and pharmacist before this with absolutely zero criminal history. Again, this isn't about Mr. Richard Allen. This is about the leaking in the case. But my passion for being upset at people who do this, who leak sealed evidence, they cause issues. Now look what's happening to this innocent man. His counsel has been removed of him. He is currently sitting in prison without counsel, right? Even though he's not in a physical court setting, he has the knowledge in his head that he is unprotected. That is not okay. He is deteriorating in prison. His attorneys have been admonished for trying to bring up issues with the abuse and these patches that you see here on the screen. The guards admitted to wearing those. Okay, so like this is very weird, very odd mental things happening to this person who we don't have a conviction of guilt for yet. This person is innocent still, right? I think innocent overall. I know that there is a strong portion of the internet community who will blast me for that. People seem to be very convinced that he is guilty. I would say I spend a lot of time looking at evidence, and you should look into, if you're someone who is very convinced of Richard Allen's guilt, the only thing tying him directly to that crime scene is a unspent bullet that was not photographed at the crime scene. And they say it matches up with being manually ran through a same gun that is owned by Richard Allen, but the science on unspent ballistic shell casings is very, very bad. It is junk science. It does not hold up. It is not legitimate. And why wasn't it photographed at the crime scene? Anyways, I'm going off into a rant, but when it comes to leaks of information, they affect people in these cases. Now, Mr. Richard Allen is sitting in prison. This is um, a note written by another inmate who said that as he has been recording abuses perpetrated by corrupt guards on Richard Allen, he was then removed from his cell, beaten, and his logs of all of the abuses of Richard Allen were taken from him. I understand people don't want to take criminals at their word. This person is a convicted criminal locked up in the prison with Mr. Richard Allen. Again, though, I do think that any accusations of abuse by people in power in prisons especially need to be looked into. It's not fair for our justice system to allow abuses to happen to people in prison. It's not an eye for an eye kind of society, and we should not be okay with people being hurt. We were mad at them for hurting other people, right? So we should not therefore be okay with them being hurt or abuses being perpetrated on them. How are we supposed to show them that the world's a good place? Sorry, this is my own rants, but when people are leaking information, you affect people. Zoom in on Mr. Richard Allen and you tell me that it is okay that someone leaked documents that got his attorneys kicked off the case, and he is now sitting in prison like that, innocent. So when people question, why do I go so hard against the leaker in the Alexee Trevizo case? Because guess what? Even though I think Alexee's guilty personally, in my own personal opinion, she deserves her fundamental rights. She deserves her rights to her fair trial. She deserves her right to not have her information released by people who supposedly believe the hospital did something wrong. Well, all you're doing is affecting Alexee. So those are my opinions, but that's exactly why these kind of things really upset me. And I feel like they are way out of bounds. That's the reason why actual journalists and press people have the access to things that they do, because they have a strong sense of ethics and they are tied to a name larger than themselves, meaning the newspaper or the news organization that they work for. It holds you accountable and holds you in line, right? Now, the documents in this case released here by Mr. Mitchell Westerman were released to just podcasters. No offense, I'm literally just a YouTuber too, right? Like, we're just people on the internet. Unless you are a podcaster who is also tied to a legitimate news organization, the more and more this stuff happens, they are causing issues in this ecosystem online. This is a very big deal because, for lack of a better way to put it, the want for attention and a story and clicks and views should never come at the cost of actual sealed legal documents being released. It's not worth it. And unless you have the belief that some serious corruption is happening on such a high level that you are really required to release something sealed, I could see that. But the way that these podcasters and the way that these people are obtaining this information and releasing it, including 10th Woman, it is wrong, in my opinion. There is a reason you're not a real journalist. There is a reason why you do not work for a reputable news source. That's just the way it is. You're an independent actor and you're not held accountable when you're releasing things like these, the people who release the crime scene photos in this Delphi case, like the medical records in the Alexee case. And it is an issue. It really is an issue because also, the first trial was ever streamed on TV in 1991, right? Now, this new world started post 2020 where trials are streamed very heavily and very watched on YouTube, and more cameras in courtrooms are happening, so much so that it's a whole new landscape in this realm. And I'm hoping that the ethics and morals of people who cover this stuff are going to catch up, because as far as I can see, there is some real issues in the true crime genre, TikTok and podcasting included. These people are not being good people with the information they're getting, and the need for attention or want to have views and clicks and stuff is the only thing I can chalk it up to. Because if you were an ethical journalist, you would know not to release these types of things, that you would be approached by bad actors with information and you do not release it. I don't know if anyone's well versed in the story of the Zodiac killer, but the Zodiac killer is very, very interesting. You study it in psychology, and it's always been, kind of one of those mysteries because it includes ciphers and it includes, multiple suspects and taunting of the police and all kinds of things. Well, part of the Zodiac killer's thing was releasing information through the newspaper, because remember, this was way back when, with the newspaper, when they didn't have social media. But the Zodiac killer would write into the prominent newspaper, though I believe it was the San Francisco Chronicle or whatever, and he would want his information talked about and told. It was an ethical battle in which, prosecutors and detectives and the heads of the newspaper would have to discuss what they wanted to put out there because of it. So I'm not saying that people are releasing stuff, akin to a serial killer like the Zodiac, but what I'm saying is the media has long been used by nefarious actors to do things. And if you don't have the forethought to think that you could accidentally really, really, really screw something up by releasing it, then you don't deserve your platform, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion. And whoever wants to come at me about that can come at me. Whoever wants to say that I'm trying to deplatform anyone, you can come at me and try and say that. But there is a standard of ethics that we need when it comes to actual legal proceedings. I don't think the internet realizes what they're doing when they do that. And just to show you how serious that this is, someone in this leaking case from the Delphi murder leaks, Delphi murder photo leaks, they are no longer with us by their own acts. They harmed themselves to death. Okay. I've heard you're not allowed to say the word for it on YouTube. So yeah, serious things happen because of this. These have real world consequences. People are faced with actual jail time and fines, and maybe even sometimes the reality of what they did being wrong. who knows? I don't know what really, like, they say it was because of this leak that this person took their life. And they were someone involved in it. They were someone who passed on this information. So that being said, there are crazy things that happen in the law all the time. People who don't know what they're doing and don't understand the law should probably not put their foot in it. That's why I've been extremely careful, even in my investigation into the medical record leaks, because number one, the state and Gary Mitchell should be doing their job on that themselves. Not waiting for the judge, not waiting for anything. They should have already found, number one, me in my videos, and number two, 10th woman herself, because her she does not try and like hide where she lives, we'll put it that way. So with that being said, they should have already been able to find her, find out what's going on. Maybe it's happening under wraps and we don't know about it. That it could be a possibility. The issue I have is the more time goes on, the more stuff gets buried, the harder it is to subpoena phone records and messages and things like that. If I was on the defense team and I really cared, I'd be on it right now, because let's say the judge finally makes a decision on this evidence, then they say, oh, well, crap, we need to look into this medical record leak. It's going to take more time, probably push back the trial. It's just not right. So it should be happening as we speak, right? This should be going on currently. They should be worried about this and doing something about it. If not, something kind of fishy is going on, because if this was a case I was working on, we would be making sure that the leaker was very well known by now. Like, that would be our priority number one, and we'd have way more power to do that because we'd have subpoena power. So I don't understand why that's not happening, because again, things like this happen. The longer it goes on, someone has hurt themselves in the Delphi leak. And so again, it is imperative to get on it, and for, you know, the people in the Trevizo case to make some moves here, because as you will see here, it is an issue. There is it's not a offense in the way that it was in Indiana for Mr. Westerman to be charged, but it is an element of an offense, which means you could possibly use it as an element in a tampering with evidence or some other kind of charge, whatever they would want to charge this leaker with. Because again, we know in the Alexee Trevizo case that those medical records are state's evidence. And the more and more information that I get, because, oh, wow, seems like, well, let's just say this, there's no honor amongst thieves, my mom used to always say. And so I knew it'd only be a matter of time before people close to the leaker and the 10th woman started slowly but surely dropping like flies. But with that being said, I do think that with the newfound prevalence of leaking documents, that New Mexico is probably going to be very interested in finding the leaker of these medical records. It would set a standard, and it kind of seems like things are getting out of control there, not just in the Alexee Trevizo case, but their system as a whole. No shade to all the people from New Mexico who are watching, but I think you mostly all agree your criminal justice system is kind of running rampant. You guys have tried twice in your legislature to close the gap on the no mandatory minimum for murder 2 in your state, which is just crazy. It's the only state in all of the United States that does not have a mandatory minimum for murder 2. Just like, what? That's wild. And so I know that people kind of think it's the wild, wild west and you can get away with whatever you want in New Mexico. But when you kind of spit in the face of the system, they don't like that. And that's basically what happened. If you saw in my last video, I saw what I felt are a couple Freudian slips made that really add up to what I have in these messages between the leaker and 10th woman, which is that, you know, this person likely is associated with the hospital. And from there, Templeman seemed to accidentally say the person who had to give them to the police and the person who made the copies, which I was like, because ever since this happened, we've known there's only two ways that these documents came out. We literally said that exact way that someone made copies or took photos of these court-ordered medical records and kept them for themselves, or it was distributed somehow via Team Trevizo after discovery, because again, they are a sealed court-ordered document. That's really where this person went wrong. Well, let me take that back. They went wrong in doing this at all, but they went wrong, number one, in taking a copy of those documents, but they probably knew, when else can I do this, right? I can't access these records without a record of it. The hospital's tracking system is on it. It would know. So this was a crime of opportunity, so to speak, and they took that opportunity. And we knew that had to be the case, or even if Team Trevizo was innocent, so to speak, would have had to come from them if that's not what happened. Because let's say even Rosa was trying to talk to one of her friends or her closest people as a very distraught Rosa after her daughter being arrested. They get their package of discovery. She's talking to her friends and sending documents and images of documents saying like, but look, this says this, like my daughter's innocent, yada, 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 not unheard of. I know in cases people, we tell them not to, but they will talk to people. So I've always thought maybe they could have even been innocent and someone betrayed the Trevizo family by releasing these documents after being given them in confidence. So we knew that there was only two ways: via discovery and Team Trevizo, either innocently or not, or this person took this opportunity. Is that hard to believe and think? 100%. But obviously crazier things have happened. Now, this is just a few clips from the article. I will tell you guys exactly how this supposedly went down, and that's where we get into why this is so interesting when you compare it to the leak in the Alexee Trevizo case. So essentially, Mr. Westerman is friends with one of the attorneys for Mr. Richard Allen, the accused killer in the Delphi Murders case. Mr. Baldwin, Andrew Baldwin, not Alec Baldwin, but my head always reads it as that, so I'm sorry if I say that. Andrew Baldwin is the attorney whose office the photos and all the evidence was being stored in. The other attorney, Mr. Rosie or Rosie, I do not know how it's pronounced, is co-counsel, but they did not keep documents at his law firm, only at Mr. Baldwin's. So Mr. Baldwin has a longtime friend and old worker of his firm come, and I guess they have coffee, they hang out, whatever it is. At some point, that Mr. Westerman, the leaker of the documents, was directed to a conference room, told to wait there. In that conference room, according to Westerman, the photos were laid out already. He didn't open files, I guess, whatever. He took pictures of crime scene photos and then distributed them. He admits to this. Now, some of you may say the attorney was negligent. I would be curious to hear if that is your opinion, if you think that is the attorney's fault. Obviously, the attorney should not have told them, or the legal secretary, whoever put him in that conference room should have seen those photos out. That's his story. Maybe he looked into the photos. Maybe he opened a file, which you would feel comfortable having an ex-employee and longtime friend around files. Unattended is a little iffy, but again, I don't find it to be a violation unless the client, meaning Richard Allen, the defendant in this case, found it to be a problem, which he did not. He is happy with his representation and wants them to represent him. The judge has kicked them off the case, like I mentioned earlier, and will not reinstate them. Those two attorneys, Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie, have gotten their own attorneys, okay, and filed a writ so that they could basically get the Supreme Court to hopefully reverse this judge's decision. So far, the Supreme Court is working in the defendant's favor, meaning Richard Allen and his attorneys, by making the judge release the transcripts from the in-chambers meeting where she, in my opinion, threatened the two attorneys to either publicly shame them and kick them off the case in front of all the cameras once the motion hearing was to start at 2 o'clock, or they could just bow out peacefully right then and there and remove themselves. That is not the proper way. You're usually required to go through motions, and the attorneys get to plead, and the state gets to state their feelings on it. That did not happen. So hopefully these attorneys can get reinstated. Now you might think, oh my goodness, why would you want attorneys reinstated for this man who allowed this to happen? Until I have proof that these attorneys intentionally tried to leak this, why wouldn't I want them to be his attorneys, right? That he is happy with them. And that is what matters in the law, right? That this client is satisfied with their representation. And it does seem as though these attorneys are fighting for justice for Mr. Richard Allen. We have no indication to say that this was intentional at all. So with that being said, I do hope that these attorneys get reinstated. And I do personally hope that the judge gets kicked off the case, because the judge seems to have a personal vendetta, in my opinion, against this defendant and or both of these attorneys in this case. I understand that it is negligent and that this happened on one of the attorney's watches, which is unfortunate. But how the judge handled it is very suspicious. The judge also, if you read through the transcripts, took issue with the fact that these attorneys are filing civil tort motions for Mr. Richard Allen, meaning they are trying to get on record the potential abuses that are allegedly being perpetrated upon Mr. Richard Allen while in custody. And it is imperative, if those allegations are true and if he is being hurt in any way or abused in any way, that get on the record, because those have limitations in the times that you can bring those kind of tort allegations, right? So like the attorneys are not doing anything out of the bounds. It was really suspicious to me that the judge was like offended that they are trying to protect Mr. Richard Allen from abuse in the prison. And so something very weird with that. It seemed to have something not to do with the leak, which would be the only reason why you should be kicking these attorneys off the case, if at all. Again, it's Mr. Richard Allen's decision. The judge can kick anyone off that they want, but if Mr. Richard Allen's not asking for it, then why is the judge so upset when there's no proof that either of these attorneys orchestrated this? It was just an accident. So very suspicious. But again, we can see how a judge can react to this kind of leak if that's really all it is, and there's not a larger, for lack of a better term, conspiracy at play here, which I'm just going to say there are a lot of strong minds and smart minds looking at this case and saying something really, really, really fishy is going on. Okay, so I'm not discounting going into quote unquote conspiracy land on this, because personally I do believe something weird's going on. But if we want to bring it back to a non-conspiratorial place in the Alexee Trevizo case, this might be some kind of foresight to how a judge is going to respond to this leak. Okay, we could have Judge Schuler Gray, the judge in Alexee Trevizo's case, be extremely mad about this. We do not know. She could read the riot act. She could bring that house down. We don't know. This judge, let's say there's no weird conspiracy going on and nothing about the hate for the defense and a possible cover up with weird cultism things going on in this little area in Indiana. Remove all of that and just say, well, why is this judge so mad at this? It's a murder case, and evidence being leaked in a murder case is a big deal. Now we have the same thing in the Alexee Trevizo case. So I'm very curious to see how the judge will respond. So, with all that being said, that's basically everything I have in the Westerman case. I can say that according to one of the little news videos I saw from a local source about this, it was saying that all of the podcasters and everyone were getting investigated, right? Like everyone was involved in this. So it's not far out of bounds for these people on the internet in the Alexee case who have been leaking and talking about these documents so much. Um, it's not going to be out of bounds for them to be investigated, right? In my opinion, if they don't get investigated, if this medical record leak just goes by the wayside, something very, very, very suspicious and fishy. I just almost mix those two words together. Something very suspicious and fishy is going on because, again, look at what has happened in the Delphi case. Not only has someone hurt themselves to the point of death, but someone has now been arrested as well. So I know some people probably think that I am harping on the medical record leak or maybe even wasting my time with the investigation or something like that. But in reality, this is, I'll say this, I didn't know about this Delphi leak or anything like that when I've been going along with this own investigation into the medical records leaking. I just have always been worried that the state and Gary Mitchell's office are not going to be quick enough online to document everything. There's a lot of posting and deleting of comments. There's a lot of walking back of comments, things like that. Now, I'm not extremely technologically advanced, but I do have a few connections and a few people who are. But I did have some cool internet people set some stuff in motion so that we could capture as much data as possible. So yeah, I have found ways to make sure that we can follow the rabbit, so to speak, in the investigation because I was like, well, crap, they're deleting comments and I can't spend 24/7 screenshotting comments and like searching through comments. There's got to be a better way, and there's websites that can build bots for you. There's all kinds of interesting things. And so yeah, with that being said, I do hope that the state and or Gary is, and all of them technically, the state, Gary, and the judge are all looking into that medical record leak as heavy as I am. And if not, that's the reason why I post as much information in the leak as I can, because then it is public information, right? Either one of them can find it and reference it and say, well, look at what this says. That's literally quite possible. And so hopefully if they all know where to look, they can start piecing together who did this, whichever side really wants to fix this issue, so to speak. So with that being said, I may make a video about Mr. Richard Allen and some of these issues in this case. It is different from the typical content that I do in the sense of usually I am trying to prove that a defendant is lying, really, I guess, when we look at the cases I've been covering with Alexee and Charlie Adelson and stuff like that. It's pretty clear that they are making up BS stories. This is, in my opinion, quite the opposite, that possibly this person is innocent and is being held in a very suspicious manner, and legally speaking, much further than the far separated from the issues with the actual murder scene and the crime, and much different from the actual issues with the murder scene and the crime itself. There are some very odd and interesting legal issues in this case that can also be leading us to some more almost conspiratorial thought processes. But with that being said, I will be working on trying to make any sense I can out of the craziness that is going on in that case, because I do feel like it is one to follow. It is very unfortunate that this man leaked evidence and that now Mr. Richard Allen is possibly, depending on how the Supreme Court rules in this, going to be having to wait a whole nother year in prison before going to trial, completely disregarding his right to do a fair trial and a quick trial and everything like that. Being held in prison just is not okay. I mean, I understand it's a very serious crime that was committed, and you'd think that the killer should be maybe held in a very secure and safe environment, but the way things are going in regards to him being held in prison is very, very suspicious. These patches, very suspicious. I just do not enjoy seeing a possible innocent person's human rights be violated, possibly. So yeah, that is some information to come in the Richard Allen case. As of right now, we are still always going to keep trucking along in the medical record leaking in the Alexee Trevizo case, because I will not rest until we have a page like this for us in the Alexee Trevizo case. When we get the leaker's name with a case number and a criminal offense attached to it. That's really my goal, because you think you can mess with things and get away with it. You've probably all seen the text message that I have between the leaker and Templeman, in which the leaker literally does not care that it's going to come back on Renee, an innocent person at Artesia General Hospital who was just doing their job that day. So in my opinion, just horrible behavior, not okay. You don't care about what you did. You did this with a foresight. And I really do hope that justice comes and gets you. Thank you so much if you made it this far in this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you're interested in following the Alexee Trevizo case to trial, please subscribe as I'll become the legal focus. It's your girl Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.